Hey guys, today we're going north. We're going north with Fractal Design with their North case. This is a Scandinavian-inspired design and it's got some wood. So let's get out and have a look. As I said, it comes with some wood. So this comes with white oak on the front, and this particular model comes with tinted glass side panel. There's also an alternative with a mesh side panel, which also supports additional fans for intake or extraction if you really wanted to. And it comes with a little bracket on the inside. This on the other hand is always just glass. This is actually a little bit wider than a standard case from Fractal, which is great for compatibility. And it's not too tall. This is more like a mid-size case. So it can still fit a full-size ATX motherboard in it and a full-size ATX power supply. But it is still a bit more compact than, for example, the Torrent case. Let's open up and have a look at what we got inside. So the side panel comes off by just unscrewing these little captive thumb nuts at the back, and you just pull it out and it just slides right out. And it gives you the access to the whole case. It's a pretty standard design. We've got some grommets for the cabling on the side here. We've got a few big holes at the bottom for cables and a larger hole at the top here as well. As you can see, there's a lot of places to cable tie for the back side. I also like how Fractal has labeling for the sizes of the motherboards. So we've got the ATX, Micro ITX and Mini ITX, and they're labeled up so you can actually tell what's what. So it's got A's for the ATX, AMI, so it's all three of those are required for these ones. And this particular slot right here helps to hold the motherboard in place when you screw it on while the case is vertical. So it's nice to just have it in there, you slot it in and then screw everything together. One thing I immediately noticed, the feet on this case are actually really tall. So you actually can place this. I don't recommend placing this kind of case or any case on top of a thick carpet, but this gives you a bit more flexibility if you have to leave it on the carpet to give it a bit more airflow for your power supply down the bottom. The top panel also pulls back and comes off, and it actually comes with a little, probably a fake lever, or we call it a faux lever strap, but it's a nice little touch and it makes it look kind of neat with the rest of it. As you see here this is like a thin mesh, but it's not really there to resist dust. But there's no actual dust filter at the top. There are only two dust filters here. You got one at the back for the power supply, and there is another one behind the front panel. There you go. You got one more at the back here. So you can just peel it off and it comes up pretty easily. While we're here, might as well check out the wood. So you can see from the back, the wood is actually glued in to the plastic. It is actual real wood, not some sort of plastic painted wood. I swear I can figure out how to do this. Put it in the right way. There you go. This is much easier. So I much prefer this over the Meshify series, because you can pull off the whole thing, put it in and put it back on. While we're at the front, might as well talk about the only two pre-installed fans. We've got two aspect fans, which are 140mm in size. They're not non-RGB version of the fan, and I think that's really all you need. You can install up to 6 fans on this version, or you can install an additional 2 fans on the mesh version. And the totals go as follows. You can install up to 3 120mm fans at the front, or as we have right now, 240, which I'd probably leave as is. At the top, you can install up to 2 120 or 140, and at the rear, you can install one 120mm fan. Alternatively, if you went with the mesh panel, as I said before, you can install up to 2 fans on the side bracket that comes with it. And it could be 120 or 140mm, doesn't matter which one you prefer. Do note, if you were to go with a mesh panel and install fans on there, your maximum air cooler size would have to be limited. It would actually be limited to 145mm. Otherwise, it's 170mm, which is actually quite compatible with most air coolers out there. Talk about compatibility. This case supports graphics card max length up to 355mm with front fan attached. On the other hand, if you have front-mounted radiator with fans attached to it, you're limited with 300mm, which is not going to be your highest end 4090s or even 4080s at this particular case. So bear that in mind, unless you go with full water cooling loop. You do have compatibility for plenty of radiators. You can go with a 360mm radiator at the front, a 240mm radiator at the top, and 120mm radiator at the back, just like you could with the fans. Now let's check out the back. Again, 2 thumb screws to remove the back panel. Once you unscrew it, pull it out and remove. It's actually a pretty rigid panel. It's actually quite thick. As always, at the back we got the accessory box. And this just comes with a bunch of mounting screws. So your motherboard, your drive cage screws, and some cable ties. In terms of drive support, we have 2 sleds here, which are actually removable and movable. So if you wanted to, you can move them around. Potentially you would remove one of them and move the other one across somewhere in between. So to maybe mount the radiator here, or mount a larger power supply. These are dual purpose sleds. So you can mount a 3.5-inch drive inside, or 2.5-inch drive. Alternatively, there's a double sled right here for 2.5-inch drives. So you've got enough compatibility here for most normal use cases. You're not going to be able to load this case up with loads of drives and make it into a NAS. This is more a gaming or workstation kind of PC. So we have a bunch of cables for fans. One thing I like about the modern fans, especially the ones for Fractal, is you can actually daisy chain them. So each cable can be just daisy chained, and then you just plug in one of them straight to your motherboard, which saves you on potentially needing to buy a hub. Or if you're like me and you use ITX boards, they have a limited amount of headers, so that helps a lot. We also have a USB 3 cable and USB Type-C cable and audio. So USB Type-C here is USB 3.1 Gen 2, which is the 10 gigabit version. And for USB 3, that's a 5 gigabit version as well. And the ports themselves are at the front, and I actually kind of like how they look. This button here has a very premium look with a little Fractal label on it. But as you can see, there's no reset button, it's just a power button. You got the Type-C, the 2 Type A's, and I really like the fact that these are not combo ports, but individual headphone and microphone. So kind of lines up really nicely with general use, and you don't have to mess around with any dongles to use this case. Going back to the front, if you want a bit more flexibility, you can remove this panel and you have access to deal with your cooling components over here. So let's say you went with a 360mm radiator. You can remove these fans over here, move them over to the top. That way you're not wasting any of it and you're getting the maximum amount of cooling. And you put in a 360mm radiator in here. You have enough reach to go and screw it all together. I like this little feature. I do bear in mind that you won't be able to install a really thick radiator because this is a non-removable part over here. So you have just limited amount of space. At the same time, these fans are recessed. So technically speaking, you could either mount the radiator inside this side, or you could put fans here and the radiator on the back. So you can kind of dual mount it in between. Carrying on with convenience factor on this case, if we look just over here, it's actually got written 120 and 140mm sizes. So for first-time builders or people who are not too experienced, it makes it a bit easier to know where exactly you need to mount your fans, or in this case, maybe radiator with the fans attached. So you don't fiddle around and have to re-screw things. Other than that, this case, surprisingly, in both mesh and glass configuration, comes in at $149 US. So it's on a pretty steep side. It is a nice looking case, and I think you're paying for the wood, but let's see how it performs. So I'm gonna throw in my test bench inside and compare it to our Air test bench and see if it's any good. With the build complete, I want to mention a few observations. First of all, I'm a big fan of the middle standoff to hold the motherboard in place. I could put it in with the heavy air cooler pre-installed and without any help screw the things in while the case is in upright position. I also really like the grey tint of the internals in this case. It looks somewhat smart. Do note that this interior color is only for the white version. The black case comes in all black. Space-wise, there's plenty for a full-size ATX motherboard, but for our performance testing we're using an ITX system in order for it to be compatible with most cases. At the back there is plenty of space to hide all the cables, even without using any of the tied down points, which this case has a lot of. Also, since this case comes with 2 multi-drive cages below, you can fill them up and leave all of your cables above where there's still plenty of room. While we're in the subject of drives, the multi-drive cages support up to 2 drives each. If you want to put more drives in, then there's also an option to buy a 3rd cage. For those who don't really need hard drives, instead would like to install a larger power supply, then you can either remove both of the sleds or take one of them out and move the other one around based on 4 different mounting positions. With the physical overview done, let's talk about performance. For this we have our new refined testing setup, which includes professional sound level meter and new, more consistent testing methodology. With this test bench, we're using Intel i7-8700K overclocked to 4.2 GHz and Radeon 6900 XT running at stock. The fans on both the cooler and GPU were tweaked to hit 40 dBA targets, which would be very reasonable loudness for the system to run on an ongoing basis. To be honest, the actual equipment doesn't really matter, as we just need to get consistent heat output from the components to get us good repeatable results. But we wanted to have something that does produce a considerable amount of heat. Do bear in mind, temperatures are shown in degrees above ambient. In the noise normalized test, when we compare Fractal North to an open bench, it does run hotter, but not by much. There is 5 degrees difference on the CPU and 4 degrees on the GPU. When we hone in on the GPU hotspot, we also find Fractal North is 5 degrees hotter. This is not surprising, as in the open test bench there is almost unlimited supply of unobstructed fresh air. By the way, we'll be going back and retesting all of our cases we reviewed up to this point, so make sure to subscribe so don't miss all the future content from this. Going back north, to north, Fractal North that is, it includes 2 140mm fans that can actually go really fast. We put them to 100% speed and here the temperatures dropped and now we're even with the open bench on both CPU and GPU, but we still have the same 5 degree temperature difference on the GPU hotspot. This is at the cost of 8.4 dBA. While I could consider 40 dBA very reasonable, at 48 dBA it gets pretty loud. And I would say it's only acceptable to run for a short period of time to get the most performance out of your system, like rendering a file or compiling some sort of application. But this still shows the potential of the system. With this being said, let's sum it all up. It is a somewhat different take on a generally pretty plain form factor. I could see Fractal engineers trying to make an efficient case at a reasonable price, and then someone from the design team suggesting to add some wood to it for a more Nordic feel. I think they did a good job on this. The case does actually look pretty good, and it looks a bit like a fashion statement, which may be why it has a $150 price tag. While we do get 2 fans and a fan hub, there isn't anything else much too fancy with it, and it is kinda pricey for a generally basic case. At the same time, I could see this kind of case getting a pretty high wife approval rating and fitting well in most households. What do you guys think about it? Which one would you prefer? White case with oak or black with walnut? Let us know in the comments below. Also, if you want to check out any of the items covered in the video, the links are in the description below. I hope you found this useful. Don't forget to smash that thumbs up and subscribe for more. We'll see you guys in the next one.